Appreciate everybody being here. Kind of exciting time of year here. Finishing off some of last minute things over this week, kind of cleaning some things up, kind of get ready to go for next week. Excited about the opportunity we have in front of us. We feel like we have a chance to add some good football players to the team, which the goal remains the same, is trying to build the most comprehensive, most competitive team for the 2026 season. So we're making progress. I mean, if the draft was tomorrow, we'd be ready to go. I think our staff has done an incredible job of putting us in a position. There's a lot of information, and obviously we've accumulated kind of from start to finish here. So, just finishing up a few things here this week. Chris and Lip are here. Just want to say a few words about the two of them. I'd say, we're very fortunate to have a lot of the people that we do in this organization, specifically on the scouting side. This is the sixth draft for most of us, for the core of the group. Kind of been here for six drafts now. I think the continuity that we have in place certainly is advantageous and very helpful. It kind of gives us a chance each year to kind of build on some of the things that we've done previously. I'd say personally, I can't say enough great things about the job that Lip and Chris do and have done. I think we're fortunate to have them in the position that we do. At some point, they're going to get their opportunities. I mean, Lip had an opportunity here this spring in Atlanta. And I think it's just a matter of time before Chris is recognized and gets the opportunities that he's earned and deserved. But I'd say the longer they're here, it's better for the Texans organization and our group. So certainly thankful for their efforts and the efforts of the overall group. And, thought it'd be good to have them, be a part of this as well, because they're as big a part, and then not just the two of them, but comprehensively the group. They're as big a part of this as anybody. We've always talked about this. D'Amico and I have always talked about it. This program is not about one person. It's not about one individual. It's a collective effort, and we're trying to do things that in the end are in the best interests of the Houston Texans organizationally. So, again, that's why I'd say Chris and Lip are here. So, again, excited about the opportunities here next week. We'll see if we pick. If we pick, we pick. If we don't, we don't. I'm sure we'll keep you on your toes like we always do. And if we move out of the first round, then I'll probably get, some choice words about the draft party. So this is the way it goes. So, I've heard a lot worse things in my life. So anyways, so we'll start with some questions and go from there.
I have two separate questions. First for Nick and then for Lip and Chris. Nick, you've kind of become known for making a lot of trades. I think at least three draft day trades in each of the drafts you've been in. But I'm just curious your mindset, what goes into your thinking before you make a trade, how you decide that, and then I'll ask the other questions after that.
Yeah, there's never one particular thing. I think our process and approach is understand as many players as possible. What's a commensurate value for the player, and where do you have an opportunity to pick the player? And if you move off of a pick, what's a cost-benefit analysis associated with that? And what's the risk-reward, and what do you get in return? So we're always prepared to pick. If we made zero trades, I don't think any of us, you all might be surprised, but we wouldn't be surprised because none of us really know how it's going to go. What we try to do is just understand as many players as possible. A lot of this is positioning and just have an understanding of, where we think the value of the player lies. So if we make a trade, we put it up on the board and say, what do we get in return? Are we comfortable with it? And again, we're making these decisions very, I would say, organically, and it's very fluid. Multiple people are involved in a discussion, and then we'll make ultimately, at some point, we got to make a decision. D'Amico and I got to make a decision about what we feel makes the most sense. Do we pick? Okay, if we pick, here's who we're going to pick. If we don't pick, okay, if we move back, okay, we'll go back this many slots. What players could we potentially lose? Are we okay with that? Are we not? So, look, this is just understanding the value of the players, understanding the value associated with a pick, and ultimately just doing what we feel makes the most sense. So I would say there's never a prescribed, we're going to do A, B, and C. We're going to make this number of trades. It's not how we approach it. So it's case by case. We take the information in real time. Where we are positioned right now, we're picking at 28. Honestly, we have no idea who's going to be available at 28. There's probably a group, 10 or 15 players, more than likely. Unless you get to that level, they're off the board. Okay, so then you're into the next tier, right? And then you kind of go through that process. There's a reason we stack the board. There's a reason we grade the players, and we take the players as they come off. So, it's not, I don't want to oversimplify it, but that's the reality of the situation.
And going back to last year's draft, obviously y'all traded back. But I'm curious, how did you all first identify Jaden Higgins is. I know there's a relationship with Matt Campbell, but how did you all first identify Jaden Higgins that he might be somebody that you could maybe present to Nick and D'Amico or somebody that might fit this team?
Yeah, I'll speak on that one. So with Jaden, he's an interesting player because he was only at Iowa State for a couple of years. Started his career at Eastern Kentucky, was an under-recruited player, Miami kid, more of a basketball player. And I'd say the thing that, talking to him specifically from our group was how he practiced. Not only how he was spoken about. Him and Jay Knoll were spoken about in very similar ways, different personalities, but the way they practiced, I would say, was one of the first things that stood out to us. He was very consistent. Honestly, had a lot of similarities to how Hutch practiced. So there's kind of a trend among those three guys. But he was unique, and we as a group felt that only really 2 years of Big 12 football. This wasn't a guy that had been at a Power 5 for 4 or 5 years. Was there some more upside with this guy? And then you combine that with his intelligence, his work ethic, the type of person that his parents raised. We felt like he'd be a good person out of our program. And, it's year one was good, and hopefully more from him moving forward.
Nick, I have a question. I know that you guys have been really busy in this offseason, and especially in terms of with the offensive line. How much of what you guys have done before the draft will impact if you would look for somebody on the offensive line? And the reason I'm mentioning offensive line, I know that was a focus. Last week, I got a chance to talk to Hannah, and she said one of the things you all know you need to do is keep your quarterback upright. So can you just talk about where you are with the offensive line and how you feel about the moves to this point?
Yeah, we feel D'Amico and I have talked about this, before the draft, try to put the team in a position where, if you had to go out there and play a game tomorrow, we'd be able to go out there and play and feel what we feel is a competitive team. So what happened for agency, honestly, has no bearing on what goes on in the draft. So the draft's the draft. We'll grade the players, and ultimately, we'll take the best football players, regardless of the position. That's what we've always done. That's not going to change, this year relative to previous years. So, we're a BPA team. That's what we do, take the best player available. There's a reason that we grade the players and put them on the board and stack the board accordingly. So you start hopscotching around, it kind of goes against the integrity of what you're doing with the process from start to finish. So, our goal is to build, the best football team we can for the 2026 season. There's some players that we added in the spring that, hopefully they'll be able to help us. Hopefully there's some players that we add here next week. They'll be able to help us. There's probably some players that we're not even talking about that they're going to come in the building here at some point and give us some quality snaps, like Tommy Togiai has done at different points, like Naquan Jones did last year. Going back a few years ago, Derek Barnett. So it's a very fluid process. So, you just deal with it. The calendar says, okay, it's this time of year. All right, let's try to take advantage of our opportunities. All right, and then move on to the next phase. So it's a pretty fluid situation. So we'll take the best football players. It's not going to affect our draft strategy. So, whatever we feel makes the most sense at that time, and that's how we do it.
Nick, specific to adding Reed Blankenship and David Montgomery, just your thoughts on those two guys, and I have a follow-up for Liv and Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, experienced players have been very productive. Have the right mentality, have the right mindset. They were both, I would say, thought of very highly within their programs. They have a certain level of toughness, certain leadership. So we felt like those players kind of fit our program well. I think in the end, we talk about this extensively. We're drafting people. We're adding people, we're signing people. That's the priority. You have to have a commensurate level of skill, no question about it, but we're drafting people. Do they have mental and physical toughness? Do they have resilience? Can they handle situations when things don't go well? I would say those two players sort of fall into that category, and they go out there and they produce, or they have produced over the course of their career. What's that going to look like in a Texans uniform? We're all going to find out here this spring and into training camp.
And for James and Chris, when you look at philosophy, everybody talks about building the trenches, be strong in offensive and defensive lines. How does this draft shape up for particular those areas on both sides of the football, and just kind of your philosophy about wanting to be good in the middle on both sides of the football? Thank you.
Yeah, philosophically speaking, for us, building a tough, smart football team, swarm, relentless, that starts in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. As you guys have seen with the players that we've added over the years, it's extremely important for us. With this draft in particular, we've done a deep dive onto both sides, really going back to, once the draft last year concluded, just starting with the junior tape and working our way through the fall, through the All-Star Game, combine processes. So for us, we're very excited about really digging into it even more over the next week or so and adding good players to the team next week.
This one's for Nick. Earlier in the offseason, you were very clear C.J. Stroud's the quarterback for this team. Since then, you guys have picked up the fifth-year option, putting him under contract for 2027. How does that affect his future with this team, having picked up that fifth-year option?
Yeah, I don't really think it affects his future. I mean, he's our quarterback. We've said that from the beginning. D'Amico and I both said it. So, I mean, I think that was really more of a procedural thing. I mean, I don't want to say it was a no-brainer, but it was kind of a no-brainer. So, glad he's here. Again, it's more part of the process. I mean, so we're excited about his off season. I think he's had a good approach, had a good attitude here. I think he's put a lot of work in, from, I'd say, March and April. So excited to have him around here in the spring, and I'm excited to keep moving forward.
This one's for Lip and for Chris. With the changes that have come towards college football, with more players entering the transfer portal and being with the system for 1 year, has that changed your approach on how to be able to scout talent and also to see where they kind of fit in the pecking order because of how much of different personnel looks they're in?
I think it's, for us, evaluating it, it's been a positive thing. Now, I don't come from we don't come from a place of the college coaches and that world that has to deal with the everyday transactional nature of it. But from an evaluation standpoint, when players have been at multiple schools, and it's a whole nother group of people you can ask them about how are they on a daily basis, because that's honestly, not to speak for our group, but that's what we're curious about. How are they every single day? Are they consistent? How do they work? How do they show passion for ball? So at the end of the day, we're trying to find that out, players A through Z. And so when you have, hey, he left school A, went to school B, we can talk to both schools, see if the information matches up. If it doesn't, okay, where's the gap? And then, just on player-by-player basis, it's a little window into like how they make decisions, what's important to them. Really not worried about the NIL side of it. We don't get into that a whole lot. But the actual transferring, what was the reason for it? It's not a bad thing. 10 years ago, it might have been a different conversation, but these guys transfer and we don't hold it against anyone. We just want to know what their DNA is, what they're made of, and ultimately what will they be as a Houston Texan if we draft them. That's what we're just in the search of.
Nick, you're drafting 10 spots apart twice to start the draft. Obviously, that's kind of how it started with you and D'Amico, with number 2 and 12 turning into Will and CJ. How does that process, do you kind of connect that? And can you tell, as much as you can tell us, how did you come to the conclusion of getting both Will and CJ when you were 10 spots ahead when it first started?
Yeah, the spots, probably more just coincidence more than anything else, but speaking to the process, I would say, as we went through it as a staff collectively, and the great thing about how we do it, we put a lot of time between, let's call it August until December. It's very scout-centric, scout-focused. So we let the road scouts, college directors, John, Zeke, Lip, Chris, whomever, do their work, grade the player. Here's what we think of the player. Okay, and then the next layer, call it February, March, kind of go through the same process with the coaches, kind of get their lens. How do they see it? D'Amico obviously goes through his process. So we kind of arrived at the same endpoint where we basically said, look, these are 2 of the best players in the draft. If we have an opportunity to add them to our team, it's probably something at least worth considering or thinking about. Okay, then you start to put the wheels in motion. All right, as you get a little bit closer, you start to say, what's it going to take to get to that point? What's the cost associated with it? Kind of going back to the original question about moving. So once you kind of have an idea of what that looks like, then ultimately you make a decision. Okay, yeah, we're interested in doing it. We're okay with it. Or you know what, doesn't make as much sense, and we're going to do something else. So again, there's risk reward, there's cost benefit analysis that we go through. So in those conversations, we're pretty, I would say, fluid. The week of the draft, we kind of said, all right, here's what it looks like. Here potentially are our options. Are you good with this? Great. Talk about it as a staff. Hey, what do you guys think? Because they might have a different perspective and a different lens. I think the one thing about how we do it, we take a little bit of a democratic approach where we listen. We try to listen to a lot of ideas and we talk through it. I mean, matter of fact, we had a meeting on Friday where we kind of went through the whole board and it was like, hey, what do you guys think? Well, okay, we moved this player. Here's the reason why. Okay, does anybody else have a thought? You don't want to make sure we have a variety of opinions that we've gathered. We're not looking for necessarily groupthink. We're just trying to, is there something we're missing here before we ultimately make the decision? And I would say, just going back to your original question with those two players, we talked about it and we felt, you know what, in the end, it's worth whatever we need to do to get to that point, which is why we made the decision that we did. The fact that I didn't realize that we happen to have 10 spots in between kind of these first few picks. I mean, that's kind of happenstance more than anything else. So we'll kind of see how it goes. But I think you have an idea of, hey, if you're going to move from this spot to this spot, here's the cost associated with it. And then you have to look at what's your inventory of picks, whether it's this year or next year, and ultimately make a decision and go, okay, yeah, that's worth doing, or you know what, we're comfortable doing something else. So again, there's no like one size fits all approach. I think one of the things we pride ourselves on is just being as adaptable and flexible as possible and not necessarily getting so caught up in, well, we got to have this player. If we don't do this, I would say in their particular case, we felt pretty convicted, like these would be two pretty good players to add to the team if we had the opportunity.
Nick, what does best player available mean when it comes time to draft? Like, are you best player available at what position, a certain position, or just the best player available on the board?
Yeah, it's trust the grades. And there's a reason that we put grades on a player. So again, we grade the players, we stack the board, we do it vertically and horizontally, and then you work across. Okay, if you have two players that are similarly graded, okay, great. If you have another player that's graded a little bit lower at a quote-unquote position of need, okay, so you're going to take the lesser player when our grades tell us let's do something else. So again, it goes back to the integrity of the process. So trust the grades. There's a reason that we grade the players. We're not a round-based team. We assign a commensurate value to the player of what's the value relative to what we think the role is going to be. That doesn't mean we're going to be right about it. It just means this is how we see that player if we were to add him to the team. So work across, work vertically, and then pick the players off as they come. So I guess that's what that means. So I would say, like, other than quarterback, like, there's no position that we wouldn't consider drafting if that's what the board told us. So that's why we set the board. That's why we spend as much time on it as possible and say, okay, here's a group we're picking from. And again, we're not picking every player. Like, we're going to reduce it down to however many players that at some point we would consider drafting if we had the opportunity. And that's probably taking 10 or 15 out that they're probably not going to be there, assuming you can't get in the top 15, all right? Well, okay, well, if one of those players, let's just say you had graded at a certain level, gets down to a certain point, okay, then you have a discussion. There's obviously a reason why or something, some mitigating circumstance that caused that player to end up down where he is. So it's just more about trusting our grades and trusting our process more than anything else.
And along those same lines, you've always told us that, you know, drafting is like a crapshoot. You can either win or you can lose. You've been pretty good in the later rounds as far as picking talent. When you're looking at your board and when you're looking at the best player available, do you also look at if some of those late rounds that you have here that may have outperformed what you thought that they would as far as their draft grade was concerned, and when it's time to pay them, or you're looking to fill that need?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the late round of free agents, honestly, the 5th through undrafted players, it's probably a similar pool of players. And I would say, honestly, that's where, like, you tip your hat to your scouting staff because they know the players as much as anybody, and we spend as much time talking about that group of players as we do the other players that are graded higher. So, again, drafting and grading, it's just, all right, how do you get the guy on the team? Right? Okay, here's the grade. All right, the grade probably tells you, okay, you're going to probably have to draft this player to get him on the team. Okay, some of the later players, all right, they're a certain grade. Maybe you thought based on like what you see on tape, like here's a grade we think of the player. Okay, they're still valuable to your team. And, you know, if they come in your building and play better than somebody else, that's great. Like, we let the players, D'Amico said this countless times, and we both feel the same way. It doesn't really matter where you were drafted. Like, if you're drafted in the 1st round, great. If you're drafted in the 7th round, great. If the 7th rounder beats out the 1st rounder, okay, great. Now, what happened that caused that to happen? Okay, maybe the player didn't perform at the level that you thought he was going to perform. It's going to happen. So, like, we've all been around a lot of really good players who were drafted early or were drafted in the middle, who were drafted late. I mean, that's the way the league works. So, I would say, like, the Saturday discussions are, I would say, as, you know, we spend as much time on those and are as in-depth, and it's the same thought process and mindset. It's not, well, we're sitting here on Saturday in the 5th round, okay, the guy's character is horrible. Don't worry about that. Well, okay, you draft him in the 5th round or you draft him in the 3rd round, it's still the same person, which goes back to what I said earlier. We're drafting people. So if you get the people right, when you look at, I would say, some of those people that we've drafted in the late rounds, they're some of our top, I would say, borderline elite makeup players. Henry, Hutch, I mean, there's Jared Patterson. Like, there's a reason those players have maybe stuck around beyond maybe where they were drafted. Again, happens all the time. We're not the only team that goes through this. I mean, let's go look at Seattle. I mean, Drake Thomas, like, who wasn't drafted, was a starting linebacker who's got a contract extension because he plays with his hair on fire and he represents the 12s the way they want to play. Like, so it happens all over the league. And, you know, look, I would say as a scouting staff, I don't speak for Lip and Chris, but you take a lot of pride in those players because those players have an opportunity to enhance your overall program, enhance your overall team, which, again, just get them in the building, right? Okay, if they're on the roster, great. If they're off the roster in the practice squad, no problem. Like, we've talked about this, you're going to need those players at some point to go in and play in really important snaps, like Miles Bryant did, you know, when he was here. There's a guy who wasn't drafted. You look at you guys have talked to Miles. Okay, you look at Miles. How did this guy make it 6, 7 years? Well, because he's smart as hell, he's tough as hell, he's instinctive, and he's got the right mentality and a mindset. So those things are important. Are they more important later than they are early? I wouldn't say that, but a lot of the times, because of that, that's why those players end up. And look, there's a lot of players that we had the good fortune, Lip and I both did in New England, that fit that profile as well. So again, I know it was a long answer. I'm sure you guys are shocked by that, but it was a long answer to what we were hoping was a simple answer. But hopefully that helps.
Lip, Chris, I want to go back, particularly you answered about the kids going into transfer portals and everything. You alluded to a word that's just sort of like a hair on fire, NIL, but you said, well, it's not that big of a deal. But how much does it become a factor of these kids' character when you really start trying to evaluate? Is that the type of when you start looking at character traits, and does that fit your organizational structure?
Chris, go ahead. Why don't you hit that one?
Yeah, I'd say with NIL, to Lip's point, to Nick was talking about, it's another data point for us to understand like who they are, what motivates them, and really it allows us to see how they're going to be as a professional, because that's really a glimpse into a professional mindset. You know, as we all know, money, it is a factor in some of these decisions that are being made, and for players that are able to handle themselves very well when money comes into play, as long as their motivation stays true to football and everything's grounded in the football game, and they're making good decisions, then to us, it's a good data point. And on the flip side, if they give us evidence where it's like maybe they're not handling it as well as maybe as they can, what's the reason behind it? Is it a maturity reason? Is it because they don't have access to the right resources? And for us, as we evaluate the players, it's really about understanding, one, where they're coming from and how they can integrate into our program. So the more data we have on them, whether it's NIL or something else, we want to know so that we can make the determination if they can have success, with the Houston Texans.
All right, so Nick, you've joked a couple of times about trading back and how people will be upset with you if you do that. So should we take that to mean that you're more likely to trade back than to trade up? And to that point, what's your appetite for, in all of you, your appetite for trading up if, say, one of those players that you didn't feel like was possible for you to get starts to slip and maybe that's more of a realization for you?
Want me to let Lip answer that question? No, I'm just kidding. No, look, I think we're prepared for anything. I don't think there's we're going to do this. I mean, look, we could go both ways. Again, it's always who are you trading up for? Kind of going back to Landry's question, how far are you going, and what do you have to give up in return? So, and then, okay, if you get past a certain cohort of players, all right, what's the next tier? All right, well, we're comfortable with these 5 or 6, or you know what? Maybe we'd rather have this player as opposed to that player. So again, look, I'm not trying to be cute here. We could go either way, but again, a lot of it is driven. Trades are always a product of the player. They're very player driven, and we're going to sit in there. I'm sure what we'll do is you get through 10 picks or so, And, we'll keep having conversations and discussions as the players come off. Okay, here are our options. Hey, what about these 2 or 3 players? What are our thoughts? Hey, what are our grades? What do you think? Hey, Meek, what are your thoughts on this one? Yeah, I like the player. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, where are we collectively as an organization? All right, is it worth doing? All right, and then we'll put the scenarios on the board. Hey, it would cost this. Okay, well, if we do that, then that means we're going to be out of this, this, and this. Okay, like we're either comfortable or not comfortable. So, again, it's very, I know Omar's going to ask for cameras in the draft room, but it's very free-flowing, and it's very active conversation. We don't just sit there looking at a screen, watching all the fans jump up and down, when somebody gets picked, and, Roger does his big hug with the player and all that, and handshake that he's got worked out. So we're working, we're thinking, hey, we're preparing, and then we're always ready to go whenever we got a pick.
And I did, the last thing I wanted to ask about was the tight end group. I'm curious on how y'all evaluate this class of tight ends in this draft, and then also for your own team and that position group where you guys are with the life cycle of that. Like, you just extended Dalton, but kind of behind that, there could be a question of depth and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I'll hit our group, and then I'll let Lip kind of maybe talk about like the tight end group here. So with our group, we got a lot of guys in some different categories. Brevin's had a couple years here, unfortunately, where he's had some injuries set him back. So, he's a player that we've liked having in the building. So, honestly, it's probably TBD with him a little bit. So, but he's a great kid. He's got a good attitude. Look, he's been here working his tail off. So, he's got a great spirit. He's, everybody's rooting for Brevin. There's a little bit of an unknown there, what we actually have. All right, Cade has played decent football at different points. He's going into kind of year 3, so there's certainly some areas that he can improve. Foster has played pretty good football at different points of his career, whether it's in Vegas or with the Saints. Dalton's probably been our most consistent, probably the most steady player that we've had at that position here over the last 2 to 3 years. He had a career year. I think he break the career a single season reception record. Broke Owen's record, unfortunately, who OD is a really good player. But there's some question marks if we're just being real, But, we think there's some players there that potentially can help us. So what other opportunities that leads to in the draft, we'll kind of see what that looks like.
No, it's no different than any other position. We're going to, as a group, scout the tight ends, no different than we're going to scout any other group. But it is I would call it a deep group, and they come in all shapes and sizes. A lot of impressive guys we've talked to at all-star games, a couple underclassmen thrown in there. You've got some more typical Y tight ends, your bigger bodies, your line of scrimmage players, your blockers. You've got some more, I'd call them passing game players. So I would say no one guy is exactly like the other. They're all very unique, and I think no different than the other 31 teams. What's your flavor? Which kind of guy do you like? What are you looking for? A lot of, I would say, high quality just humans in that group too. It's a lot of good dudes, a lot of smart, mature guys that I'm sure us and a lot of other teams but we're going to scout the tight end group in 2026 the same way in 27 and 28. I think that's the directive from Nick and D'Amico. It's our process really doesn't change no matter if you've got 10 on the roster or 2 on the roster. You've got to do the work. So ultimately, whenever Nick looks at Chris and I and our group, hey, are we good on this player? We try to tell that to the rest of the guys in the room. Every player on the board needs to have conviction, yes, no, and that's our job for Nick and D'Amico.
This is for Chris and Philip, kind of a 2-part question. The first part is, what is your approach to scouting HBCUs, and do you spend much time there? And then is there a group that, not with HBCUs, but across the board, a position group that is deeper this year than most?
Yeah, I'll take the first part. Particularly the HBCUs, we treat them like any other, college football program. We go in, we evaluate them, whether it's a school visit, tape visit. We'll see them at the All-Star games. There's really no difference in how we approach HBCUs.
Yeah, on the position-specific question, not to get anything too specific because I don't want to say too much, but there's definitely, I can think of a couple that come to mind that are, okay, it's light here. Nick and D'Amico and our group, we've had that discussion, honestly, dating back to the fall. Hey, this particular group, it's going to be a little light. So I think the way that affects things is maybe get to day 3 and, hey, Nick, the way it's sort of played out, there's really only 1 or 2 left at position X that may make our team or be a factor. If we really want one, it's probably going to be early or it's going to be one of these 2 guys. We don't want to get into those positions, and there's going to be the inverse of that argument is, hey, there's still a dozen guys out there at this position. We don't have to, go crazy and go get one immediately. We might can be a little patient at this position, but I think that's part of our job is really knowing the landscape, pick by pick. Hey, Nick, this is getting a little thin here. Hey, Nick, there hasn't been a guy at this position go in 30 picks. We're okay here. And again, he could probably do it without me, but we try to feed him as much information as we can, just because that's our role on game day, for lack of a better term.
You guys have obviously been the final 8 the past 3 seasons. How much does trying to get over that hump factor into drafting, into free agency, into trades? How much does that, knowing that you're on the cusp of doing something historic in this franchise, kind of factor into how you guys make moves?
Yeah, I mean, our focus is on the 26 team, just trying to put the best team together that we feel gives us the best chance to win. I mean, we're definitely proud of the program that we built. You know, our consistency over the last 3 years, ultimately it comes down to your ability to execute on game day. So, I mean, I think they put a stat out there. I mean, 70% of the games last year were, like, league-wide, weeks 1 through 17, 70% of the games were one-score games in the fourth quarter. I mean, so, like, it's as competitive as a league as there is. I mean, this isn't like the NBA. So, I mean, we got a really competitive league. So try to put together a really good team, give our team a chance, you know, to hopefully play good football, and put ourselves in a position where we got maybe a chance to win in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, the margins are, look, you guys, I mean, you've seen a lot of football. You guys have followed us. You followed the league. The margins are pretty small. So, in the end, it goes down to basic execution. And when you look at the team that actually won the championship this year, I mean, they were really good on defense. They ran the football well. They took the ball away. And they played good situationally. So, like, whichever team is the one team left standing at the end of the year, there's probably a good chance that they've done those things. So, hopefully we can put ourselves in a position, you know, where we have the opportunity to do so. And in the end, it's just going to come down to our execution, you know, in the games that, you know, that matter.
This is for any of you. When it comes to evaluating offensive line prospects, other than the non-negotiables, are any of the main variables, have they changed now with Cole leading that room compared to past years?
Yeah, I'd say just generally speaking, the offensive line, it's probably one of the, I don't want to say one of the harder positions to evaluate. And I think a lot of times, and this is where you can use multiple checks and balances. So, look, everybody watches the tape. A lot of the college systems are the college systems. A lot of the things that these players are going to be asked to do, it's probably going to be a little bit different. What you see on tape, you know, the one thing, you know, not just the Houston Texans, but league-wide, there's probably some benefit to the individual player workouts because you might be able to see something in a workout. You're not sure if he really has it or you didn't see him do it on tape, that maybe put him through the paces and say, you know what, he actually does this better than maybe we thought. And it's either a technique flaw, or it's a body position flaw, or his ability to take coaching. I think that position, there's a certain level of instinctiveness, certain level of awareness, certain level of toughness, and to be able to take coaching and apply coaching. And we've seen multiple examples of players who didn't have an extensive history playing offensive line. Like Malata's a good example. Stephen Neal's a good example. They basically played another sport, but they were coachable. They had the right mentality. They had the right mindset. Even going back to Mason, like unless the last time I checked, there's nobody that runs a triple option in NFL football. So other than Georgia Tech, now they don't run a triple option anymore. But okay, so you had to make a little bit of a projection. Well, he's going to be able to actually do the things that are going to be required for an offensive lineman to have some success. So I would say it's a pretty nuanced position. Look, in the end, you got to be smart, you got to be tough, you got to be physical. You got to be competitive. Like I would say, those are some non-negotiables. And then there's some technique things that either a coach is going to emphasize or that you're going to focus on within your system. And then I would say to a certain extent, you have to be able to extrapolate whether or not the player is going to be able to handle it or not.
Thank you. For Nick, we can see that the name of the stadium is being taken down, and in 3 weeks, FIFA will take over this facility. Can you tell us a bit of how much has been worked with them for this not affecting the players like OTAs and everything that you have to do, guys?
Yeah, fortunately, it's not affecting us all that much. I know it's an exciting time, you know, in the city of Houston. So, unfortunately, I'm probably the wrong person to ask any soccer questions to because that's not my cup of tea. But I know there's a lot of interest. You know, Chris and Lip probably, you know, have a little bit more interest there. But no, again, they've been good to work with. We haven't had any issues. Like, there's no roadblocks or anything. Our players are able to kind of move through the building. We're in the off-season program. I think in middle of June, FIFA takes priority over the Texans. So that's probably your all time to shine there. So, but overall, I mean, it's been good to work with them. I'm sure Mike probably has a little bit more insight, Toman, on this than I do. But, it's an exciting time. A lot going on in the city of Houston for sure. So I'm sure the stadium will be packed when the games are played. That's for sure.
Chris, I know you said earlier that the evaluation kind of starts right after the draft of the next draft class. Aside from injuries, does the evaluation typically in players change much from when you all first started to the current draft? The current draft. Does it typically change much? Because I know some prospects can come out of nowhere. Some prospects may have a down year versus the previous year. Because I'm wondering how you all trust that.
Yeah, I mean, we trust the tape. The evaluation, that begins on the tape evaluation from the previous year and most of the current year. And when you talk about the injuries, you talk about the character profile. As you're getting more information on these players, the evaluation of the total player is going to continue to grow and evolve. And then the other part of it, as Nick alluded to when he talked about the offensive line, is when we get with the coaches, as the scheme evolves, as coaches' demands or the wants, evolve, that's where the evaluation and their place in the building, the fit, that's where all that starts to come together. So the evaluation doesn't stay static, I would say, in the fall, but it's always evolving and growing. And really, this week and into next week, we'll find out, where the true value of the player lies.
I would say there's not like a huge standard deviation. So when we go through kind of our spring reports or spring process, they're going to watch however many players, kind of initially assign that initial grade. Here's what it looks like. That's what the grading scale is for, kind of get them in the ballpark. Again, could a guy slide maybe a slot or two? Yeah, if it's a significant, like say, gap, something happened, we either missed the evaluation or the player drastically improved. But I would say it stays within 1 to 2 sort of grade levels. It's not, well, we graded him at this level, kind of towards the bottom, and then all of a sudden he ends up at the top. If that happens, I mean, you better have a pretty good reason why that took place, or you just kind of missed something. So, again, you're going to kind of have a little bit of a bell curve. You're going to have the core right there in the middle. You're going to have some outliers. Okay, are we sure on the outliers, good or bad? Something happened. Okay, was it injury, transfer? The guy just played really well. Okay, then it's a 1-year production guy. Then there's a lot of things that your heads kind of start spinning there a little bit. But for the most part, we talked to the group about treat the spring as if the draft was the beginning of June. Don't treat it it's in spring, I'm going to be a little bit more lenient. Or go through the same thing. Hey, watch 2 or 3 games. Hey, what do you see? Okay, here's his strengths, here's his weaknesses, here's the role, here's what we think the value is going to be. Okay, great. And then you go into the school in the fall and training camp. Hey, here's what I saw. Yeah, it looks pretty similar. Okay, and then you just continue on. So we try to stay true from start to finish. And again, put as much emphasis at the beginning as you do at the end.
Yeah, for Lip, when you look at the trends, are you seeing more positional flexibility in the secondary when it comes to the draft, just with how some of these guys prepare, and just what have you seen from some of the big conferences, especially SEC guys that can do a lot of different things? Thank you.
I wouldn't say there's been a massive jump, but I think just speaking specifically to the secondary, you do see guys, play some nickel, play some safety. You don't see as much flexibility away from the outside corner position. It's more inside the formation, middle of the defense. There's a couple schools and some pods of players in this draft that, hey, it's 3 players and they all kind of rotate. One snap he might be a nickel, the next snap he's a boundary safety. And I'd say for whether it's offense or defense, not to speak for D'Amico or any of our coaches, but the more versatile player is, I mean, that's certainly a bonus. But at the end of the day, they have to let's start with doing one thing at a high level, and then if you can do a couple things, that's great. But to answer your question, I wouldn't say it's some huge trend that we're noticing, but it does come up talking about player X. Hey, this guy's played 400 snaps in nickel when he was a freshman. It may not seem that big of a deal. That's a big deal because they may come to the NFL and they're not a complete fish out of water. They've actually lined up there. They've felt the speed of the game from there. Even though they've been playing safety for the last 3 years, at least they played left tackle as a freshman. He's been a 3-year starter at right tackle. Hey, at least he's gotten that stance before. So we do make note of it. can only put so much stock in it, but I think just knowing the history of each player is a huge part of the job.
No master's questions.
It feels like there's more 25-year-olds in this draft. It feels like it's a little bit more common between COVID and everything. What are the factors that go into, say, like a 25-year-old who's a 6-year guy and a 20-year-old who's a junior? What are the factors in the conversations that go into that big of a gap of age?
No, it's a great question, Landry. I would say, honestly, you ask 10 people, you're probably going to get 10 different answers. I would say there are definitely benefits to a player that has played more football, and you have a better sense of what it's going to look like. A player who's played less football, maybe there's a little bit more of a, not projection. Look, there's a projection element with every, but like was only played 2 or 3 years. What do we think it's going to be? Okay, then you kind of have to put that into your calculus. So, I mean, honestly, depends on your philosophy. So I think to a certain extent, there's been some discussion about, well, NIL, players being in college more, is kind of a negative. Maybe it's a positive. So we can't control where they are, what they are. That's all we can do is understand who they are, what's their situation. If a guy's only played 10 games, 10, 11 games, he's only played 10, 11 games, then what is that going to look like the next year? Okay, then you're going to have to make some, I would say, estimation of what you think it's going to look like. So, I mean, just philosophically, it depends on what's the priority, what are you trying to do? Like, in the end, you win with football players. So, and it goes back to, regardless if they've only played 2 or 3 years or they've played 5 or 6 years, mindset, physical, mental toughness, resilience, handling adversity, at some point, those are going to come up. So even if a guy's like a 20-year-old kid, okay, he's not played much football, he's got all the talent in the world, but he's mentally weak, he doesn't have a lot of resilience. Okay, like, what's that going to look like? Well, I'll tell you what it's going to look like. It's probably not going to end up looking that good, you know? And, okay, is he going to get stronger? Is he going to get bigger? Is he going to get a weight room? Like, we're going to, quote-unquote, develop him? Like, the reality is, these are all developmental players. Regardless of where they played, how long it is, as soon as they walk in our building, they're starting from ground zero. So we'll get a baseline evaluation of everything and then kind of take it day to day and then see how it works itself out.
Nick, kind of a two-part question. Right here. When you look at Tank Dell, do you believe that he will be good to go for the start of training camp? And does that affect his injuries, affect the way you go about potentially addressing the wide receiver position in the draft?
Yeah, with Tank, I mean, honestly, it's probably a day-to-day. We'll kind of see where he is. Probably have a better idea as we get through the spring of what his availability is going to be in training camp. So, I mean, he's been here pretty religiously, since he's been able to do more once he's kind of gotten out of the rehab stage. So, I mean, as far as a receiver position, I mean, look, if there's a receiver that we like, that we feel, we want to add to the team, then we're going to take him independent of kind of what's going on. And in the end, the competition will sort itself out. D'Amico and I talk about this all the time. Get them in a building, they'll figure it out, not us. So ultimately, it's going to be up to the performance of the players. So we try to stay true to that and not get so like, well, we have this. Well, honestly, like that could change in a heartbeat. You get into a game, all right, well, what's our next option? So you always want to be prepared and have some contingencies in place. But I would say a person's individual situation doesn't necessarily correlate to, well, we have to draft this over here, and if we don't, so, okay, like, if you draft it, you draft it. If you don't, you don't. I mean, there's a group of players that, we haven't talked about, like, after the draft, if they're not with a team, all right, is there a player that we feel could add some value to our team and program? We signed Chubb kind of, later in the spring last year. It was May or whenever it was, and Nick ended up coming in here and doing a pretty good job and helping our football team. So there's probably going to be the Nick Chubb grouping of players in May and June. There might be somebody out there that makes sense. And, we'll try to make an evaluation that we feel that makes the most sense for the team. Stephanie was trying to get in.
I know. Nick, over the last 3 years, we've seen the consistency on the defensive side of the ball, and it's been showing as far as them being, top-rated defense. One of the things that CJ hasn't had is some consistency on the offensive side of the ball, especially he's going into his 4th year playing behind, his 4th different offensive lineup. When you went to get the free agents and now you're going into the draft, how much of that is based off of getting him some sort of consistency?
Yeah, I think we're just looking for consistency as a team. I mean, that's what the focus is. So, again, there's multiple checkpoints. Okay, build a team, add players, go through spring camps, go into training camp, and then once you get to training camp, you'll have a better idea, what you think the team is going to look like. So, again, D'Amico and I talk about it all the time. We're trying to build as comprehensive a team as possible, and it gives ourselves an opportunity, and hopefully we play good in all three phases. So, I mean, that's not going to change. So that's where the focus is, and we'll do the best we can to try to put together the best team for the 26th season that gives us the best chance to win. I mean, that's not going to change as long as the two of us are here working together, overseeing the team.
Not sure who wants to address it or maybe who's kind of more familiar with it, but how is AI playing a role in the draft process? How do you integrate it, not rely on it too much, and then, trust yourself as well and maybe even question it?
Great question. I honestly, Chris is probably as versed on this as anyone. I mean, he spends a lot of time. I'll let him kind of talk about this. I think we've all I speak for myself, experimented with some of the tools, and there's different things that you can do, tools, models. Again, it's a data point, and maybe what it does, again, I'm not very smart, but it seems like their models are built, you can take massive amounts of information and distill them down into a digestible amount, and maybe it kind of guides your thought process and leads you in a direction that might be advantageous. Go ahead, CB.
Yeah, no, to Nick's point, it's really helped in terms of the research and helping us become more efficient. And we have different groups in the building that have been using it in different ways. For myself in particular, it's really helped me just, sift through different news articles and whatnot and be able to create more comprehensive reports. And then as well as like any type of work with the computer, Excel, it's almost like a research assistant. So I still believe like it's very important for scouts, for personnel people, for coaches to be very proficient, experts in their jobs, and really just looking at AI is just as another tool to really help, supplement and help us be more efficient with the work that we're doing. That's been the biggest, I would say, benefit for us at this stage. And we have a good group upstairs, Kevin Clark, Tim Brogg, and some other people who are working with it on a day-to-day and really helping us, find different ways to implement it so that, we can be more comprehensive with it.
We're actively trying to do more with it because we think we should. I mean, look, it's out there. I mean, like, we could all put our heads in the sand and say, it's not going anywhere. It's just how do you incorporate and how do you utilize it and what's the best tool available. And again, like, I give Chris a lot of kudos on this. I mean, he's very bright and he can do a lot of things that, quite frankly, a lot of us can't do, and that's helpful that we have it sort of integrated into our process. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this continues to grow and evolve over the next however many years.
Nick, you've mentioned a little bit that the 2026 role for a player kind of leads or maybe guides or is a piece of the evaluation. When you have an established NFL player that you like at that position, but you're looking at a prospect, how much is playing time availability in 2026 important? And then also not trying to overrate like a future role for the player as well as you're trying to look at 2026?
Yeah, that's the balance. So again, if we just stick to let's get the players that we feel kind of fit our profile, get them in the building. We can't ever have a shortage of whatever, right? And at some point, if we have to make a decision to either A, insert that player at the expense of another player, or B, move on from another player, that's the cost of doing business. So, it's a delicate balance of, all right, well, you draft this player, okay, maybe there's 3 or 4 other guys already at that position. What does that mean? Okay, I don't know. Well, maybe it means one thing this year, but it could potentially mean one thing next year. But, you don't really know that. So just get the right players with the right mentality, with the right mindset, create as much competition as possible, and in the end, keep the best 53 that you think you want to move forward with. Understand there's probably going to be another 15 or 20 guys that, okay, maybe you want to work with. Okay, maybe you got to find another way to sort of keep them in the building. And look, in the end, you can only play with, okay, 1 of this, 1 of that, 2 here, 5 there. Okay, who are those people? We'll see. Like, you think it's going to be this person or people? It might be different. So, again, I think none of us have a crystal ball. That's all we can do is just make accurate an assessment as possible. And, in the end, let the players sort out who is on a field, on game day on Sundays.
I wanted to ask you about the logistics of collaboration. You talked about it being very democratic. How do you get the input from the coordinators, from the position coaches to decide what kinds of players you want besides just, the swarm aspects of it?
Yeah, no, there's certain characteristics and traits that are associated with each position. And when we evaluate, when we talk as kind of a scouting group, I think what I've tried to do over the course of my career is kind of be able to sit in the middle a little bit and, interpret and extrapolate information and to be able to provide that to the group so that it hopefully can help them when they're evaluating players. And it's based on the input from, we value our coaches' perspectives, their opinion. We got a lot of really good coaches in this building, have a lot of success. And again, we want to hear, well, this player reminds me of so-and-so. Here's a reason why. Or this player does this well. Here's an area that, he's going to improve. But what we try to do with the coaches is give them groups of players. We don't give them everybody because it's not fair to them to just give them, here's 60 guys, evaluate them and tell us what you think, which that does happen. It's, hey, here's these, call it 20 to 25 players, start with this group. What are your thoughts? And then create some tiers. Hey, these 5 or 6 guys, this is how we see them. Okay, are you comfortable with any one of them? Great. Okay, no problem. So again, we're not going to force feed a player. Okay, if a coordinator or position coach says, I want nothing to do with that player, okay, but we think, you know what, screw that, like we're going to pick the player anyways, it's just not going to work. Like we're not going to ever operate that way. So again, fortunately, I think I have a lot of experience and kind of sit in the middle and can kind of take that information and use it hopefully to our advantage. But you're taking in a massive amount of information, like however many scouts evaluate a player, position coach, coordinator, sports performance, doctor, whatever other testing measures and metrics that you use. Okay, that's going back to the AI question. Maybe that's something you can use that to distill it down into a tangible and say, in the end, what do we think we have with this player? Okay, got it. All right, and then we're prepared, and then we're ready to go, and then we got to make a decision. So understanding, look, to going back there, look, this is a little bit of a Vegas element here. There's a little bit of roll of dice, but you're just trying to mitigate as much risk as possible. Look, we're in the risk mitigation business as much as anything else. So try to make good decisions, try to make good, smart decisions, and try to, do the things that are in the best interest of the Houston Texans organization. That's kind of, I would say, our ethos of kind of how we operate and try to proceed. All right, thank you all.